All right, just a little warning. I got more than 2 slides today. That's why I'm on the last part of the program. So I get my own time slot. So anyway, thank you for being here today. You know, it's truly been an honor. And, you know, you kind of made it sound like a funeral there, Joel. Like, am I not going to be around anymore? Man, I've spent 28 years of my life actually here in Kansas. It's been really good, and part of what's driven me is the passionate support of the Kansas producers. I don't directly impact them every day, but I work with people every day that do make an impact for you, and so hopefully I can share a little bit of that experience from an area that I am really passionate about. First, a disclaimer. I do have a few numbers in the slides, but I don't have any p-values and I don't have any graphs. So, and a lot of pictures. So we're still we're in tune here. But we will have some numbers, and remember they're CT values, so higher is better. Or, you know, a higher CT means less virus. So just be warned there. Well, first off, though, I wanted to cap a little bit of what we've been learning today. I want to give Daniel Linares, world-class guy here. You got a guy up here that's actually, I got one of his slide sets and was looking at his data and reading some of his papers, and he really actually changed my paradigm of my thinking. And for those of you that know me, I love the grow-finished pig. I love a growing pig. There's nothing better than seeing really good production. And I've always thought of the sow farm, you know, that's providing the material for the growing pig. And I always frame reproduction, Kendall, in frames of, you know, you're providing the raw material for what I'm really passionate about, you know. So it is important, you know. But Daniel changed my paradigm, and that doesn't happen a lot. You process a lot of information, and it doesn't happen very often. But the importance of that sow herd on the downstream performance. Good producers have always known that. They've always known it. I've been on a lot of farms, and Haverkamps. I remember going there with Mike in 1994, and they had out-of-this-world reproductive performance for that era, and what it did to drive their downstream performance, you know. We were seeing nuggets of that, but Daniel has put that into a scientific framework, and I think he's actually going to change the American industry, and we're going to value health a lot more because of what he's doing at Iowa State. So that's really good. And Caden and Emily, just got to give them a handout. It's really exciting, again, to be able to work with young people, see the passion in the industry, and I get to work with all kinds of different people, from Jewish pig farmers in Russia to Emily and Caden Roush in Lebanon, Kansas, you know. I will give you a little advice. As you scale up, biosecurity is going to be pretty important. You may want to take it a little bit more serious. And you got 3 of the best veterinarians sitting there. There's a couple other really good ones in the room. There's some veterinary expertise. You may cringe when you get the bill, but you know, in the long run, it's going to be important, you know. And then what can you say about Joe Kearns, you know? Always enlightening, always a great contrarian view of the world. I really appreciate that. But he didn't tell the whole story. He can't share his slides up on our website because they were labeled as market porn by the CFCC or whatever the acronym is, you know, there. So there's a reason he can't share them. Anyway, and Bob Talbert didn't tell the whole story either, because when we got that research barn up and going, they'd invested over $1 million in a research site, and I think they put, I don't know, Mike, was it $250,000, $300,000 worth of extra equipment into this barn? It was a lot of money. And the first load of pigs they sold out of that barn was 12 cents a pound. That's the kind of, and he told how impact that barn has had on his business. By gosh, I had to do a lot of talking, I tell you. And Mike had to do a lot of talking too to keep this thing on its wheels. So really appreciative to them as well. So if we're going to get through all these slides, I better get going. So focusing on the task at hand, biosecurity. Huh?
5 minute warning.
Yep, okay. I'm not even going to look at it. All right. I've been, when I came to vet school, I came from a pig farm, little bitty pig farm, kind of like the background you have done there, Caden and Emily. My grandfather was a pig farmer, and we didn't think about health at all. I mean, we just tried to keep them alive, that was all. But when I got to vet school, and that was when MEW, SCW, multi-site production, multi-site production changed the way we raised pigs. And it was all initially driven by health, got a lot to do with economics as well. But basically, when I got into the nutrition world, the reason I really have always kept my foot in the health world is I don't like dealing with nutritional requirements of sick pigs. I mean, it is a hell of a lot more fun to do a lysine study in healthy pigs and get awesome performance and get data that's nice and clean and you don't have to interpret it. And so one of the ways you get that is by having high health. And so that's why I've always been passionate about health. Never been much interested, and I'm an unabashed pathogen eliminator. Man, if there's an elimination scheme, I'm all for it. Because time and time again, we've undervalued the value of health, and we've just lived with too many pathogens. All right, and when you think about all the achievements, Joel, in the 25 years of my frame of window, I still remember, too, kind of Daniel reading the paper on transmission of PERS in semen. And that was a landmark, really controversial, because we used to be having, we could have these antibody-positive studs and that they wouldn't infect sow farms. Well, you're dreaming. I mean, when I read that paper, it was like, it just clicked. We got to have a PERS-negative boar stud before we can ever get PERS out of our farm. And got to give, PIC took some leadership on that, and they said, we're not going to deal with that. And nowadays, you would not stay in business as a genetics company if you didn't have PERS-negative animals. So, wean gilts in isolation. I'll talk about that a little bit with the biosecurity of our farm. Having an isolation facility. We work with a production system in Minnesota. They made this gilt thing. I thought it was great from a reproductive standpoint. You could manage the gilts all on one site until they managed to transfer PERS to like a dozen farms all in 1 week. Well, that went away. That just didn't work. You got to get gilts in at weaning into farms. Benches and Danish entries, you know, that's not a sexy concept, but revolutionary. You see these benches now? There's lots of places I go in the world, they don't use them. They just put a line on the floor. Actually, we should have benches in our BSL2 facility feed mill that's state-of-the-art, right? We just got to draw lines. But those benches, I'll show some examples. I got to thank Cassie Jones. Just this week, they did a little deal and demonstrated the value of those benches. Truck washes. Thermal assisted drawing, you know, Bob Thompson and his crew, Premium Standard, you know, they invented the whole thing. And we went up to Haverkamps with the swine trip one time, you know, and he demonstrated that thing. The value of those things, that's one thing too. We tried to do the economics of a truck wash. You can't calculate them. But boy, in the PED days of 2014, the people that had access to truck washes, they sure made a hell of a lot more money than people that did not. And so that's been a heck of a deal. We're seeing it in Asia with the African swine fever. The places that have truck washes and stuff that have a culture of cleaning the trucks, and I cringe every time I see a semi going down the interstate and it's a cattle truck and there's crap all over the side of it. You're like, oh my God, if that was a pig truck, oh, we'd scream to death. Dead disposal. You know, we learned in the PED days, those guys that had a dead truck coming on their farm had 7 times the risk of PED. Does that tell you something? Yeah. You know, on-farm composting and those kind of things. The slaughter plant risk, you know. We had an experience a few years ago where we had some pigs that got vaccinated with an unapproved vaccine, and we got them delivered to the packing plant in St. Joe, Missouri, and Mike doesn't even want to think about that one because it was stressful, and they had to go back to a farm, and about 25% of them died of APP because they'd been in a packing plant for 24 hours. And I know Daniel's done some rope testing in some of the lairages, and it's like a radioactive plant in there. You got to think of that place as, you know, those places are not, you know. And when Jim Lowe published that paper that when I send a clean truck there, you're more likely to get PED once you back up to a market hog slaughter plant than you are if you had a clean truck, that told us something about their points of risk. You know, I don't know if there's different ways of doing it, but there are points of risk. And then, of course, recognition of the feed risk. You know, PD taught us that right there, February 17th, 2014, it's the last time I provided plasma. I took plasma out of the diet. It was a joint decision here. And it was like a light switch went off. The epidemiology out in the field-based epidemiology, we didn't have p-values, but something was going on in places that were getting infected that shouldn't have been infected. And there was something going on. And I think, I'm not throwing the plasma industry under the bus. I think they've done a great job of cleaning things up. But when you have a vat of 24,000 finishing pigs mixed into one vat every day, and you're drying that, it's the unknown pathogen in there that scares the hell out of me. And so I just think that's something that's too much risk for the high health farms that I work with. Feed safety wise, that led to the feed safety, the collaboration. K-State's got the ingredients because of their strong feed science, the diagnostic medicine, the applied swine nutrition, you know, this is an incubator where the world looks at it. Everybody looks to here for feed safety. And to just prove that point, today Cassie Jones and Jordan Gebhardt are not with us today. And the reason is they're in the middle of the BSL-3 facility working with African swine fever. They hauled in a mixer and bucket elevator and they're studying how African swine fever moves through a feed mill. You know, and there's nowhere on this planet that can do that right now, unless you're out in Asia looking at it in a real-life infected scenario. But there's nowhere in North America, and we're hoping that they'll keep it in there too. You know.
For those that don't know where that facility is, where is it from here?
It's pretty damn close. And there's going to be an even bigger one coming up. You know, but really important segment of our industry. And so, Matt, I got to tell you, Cassie was really nervous about not being here today. And I told her, we need the science. That's what we're about. And we're about generating stuff for pork producers. And I'm really proud of her that she took the day to get the slot, and they're getting it done. And you're going to see some excellent information out of there instead of sitting here listening to talk to me. So Anyway, also, I want to share a couple stories, and it leads into, and it leads back to African swine fever, actually. PD. Unfortunately, our farm got infected last March. And, I was sitting at the national, or the Midwest Animal Science meetings, and I got the darn call from Mark Nelson that we sows are scouring. I'm like, okay, let's get the diagnostics in. I wasn't even really thinking about PED because we never had any exposure to PED. And then by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, John had rushed the report, and it came back PED positive. And I let out a big F-bomb at the animal science meeting because I knew not only was it going to make my life a headache, it was going to make Jason's life a headache and it was really going to make a life a headache for Mark and Frank and Dwayne and the rest of the employees at the farm, too. So, but I got to give a shout out. I go a lot of places in the world, and there is no way you could get results in 6 hours on a diagnostic test. You can do several major labs in the U.S., and you can get that done. We have a resource here in the U.S. that is unbelievable, and the Pork Board's vision of a big part of SHIC, the Swine Health Information Center, is to support diagnostic lab development of testing. And that's a huge deal. And that's a huge competitive industry thing for our industry. Here's another thing that Frank had to deal with in the farrowing house. I know some of you have gone through this. This is not nice. I cannot wish this on anybody. For them having to, we debated about whether we should, abort those sows immediately because they didn't have enough immunity. And we couldn't see doing that because we took a risk that maybe we could. But we knew from the science that those little guys are just virus factories. And by gosh, we had to make some tough decisions, right, Jason, walking through those farrowing houses. That was not easy. And it was not easy for Frank either. So, just to give you a little background, we're a 140 sow farrow to finish farm. Daniel talks about farrow to wean farms and taking them negative. Taking these farrow to finish farms negative is not an easy task. And one of the good things was we had a plan in place. We had developed a plan in 2014, and we took that baby off the shelf and we implemented it immediately. That our plan was we were going to go into elimination mode, and we went into it the day we got the diagnosis. And so I just want to show you, we have a perimeter buffer zone. We have a fence in most places. The gate is open a lot of times. But we have a zone. When you cross that zone, that's how we think of things. When you cross that zone, our gilts are quarantined in isolation. We make sure they're negative before they cross that line. We make sure semen delivery is outside that line, and we transfer it in a biosecure manner. Market pigs, with all the truck stuff that we learned, we started shuttling them into trucks. When we started our biosecurity at our farm, sometimes the truck wasn't even clean when it showed up at the farm. Or sometimes it would have pigs on it because we don't sell a truckload of pigs all the time. So you think about the risk of that. And all our supplies. Just to give you, and this has worked very well. Our farm, we've been PERS negative. We walked it off. Steve and Lisa helped me with a plan in those early days of PERS elimination. We walked it off our farm. We even had outdoor sows that we bled. You remember bleeding those, Mark, out there in the east lot? And we walked PERS out of there without depopulating. Here, I'm hoping I can have a little influence on this, maybe. Over the last 20 years, we've had 7 different sources of genetics, or not genetics, 7 different gilt sources for our farm. And it's been a wonderful, I got to give a shout out to Alan Haverkamp. They've done a wonderful job. It's been really great, and I hope that continues from the standpoint of over the last 4 years, is it? It's been a very stable source of gilt, so that's been really, really good. But we didn't have any prior delta or whatever in the last 20 years. We virtually had virtually no health event other than a little self-inflicted vaccine event in our SCW barn, but other than that. We've had a bench. When did we put that in, Mark? Was it right after in the PERS elimination days or just shortly after? It's been there a while. We've had that bench in there the whole time. Basically, you come into the farm, you go across the bench, you go into the shower area, and then we have another bench. So from bench to bench, that's our transition zone. That's basically where you're going from, we consider the outside, and I always tell people this, we consider the outside world dirty and the inside world clean. And it's really fun when I talk to vet students that have never been on a pig farm, and they say the inside of a pig farm is clean. And then I get them out to the farm, and they always comment, it is clean in here. They're always surprised. But anyway, we're transitioning in. And we do the reverse to get out. So when we got infected, clean coveralls going into each room. We wanted to limit the amount of virus. We wanted to try and limit the virus from getting into the finishing herd. And the reason is because we get those finishers infected, it's a lot more facilities to clean. It's a lot more virus, a lot more risk of getting this thing in negative. And that happens in big production systems too, right, Daniel? It's if you allow coronavirus to circulate around in the finishers, pretty soon you start dragging it back to sow farms, don't you? It's almost a guarantee. We segregated employees. We thought, we can do that. The other thing you'll notice in our diagram, our feed bins are inside of our perimeter buffer zone. Our farm was built 50 years ago. We put the feed bins on the building. Lots of farms now build the bins right up against the perimeter buffer zone so the feed truck doesn't have to go into the zone. But it's still tough. I mean, I've seen brand new buildings built on tunnel ventilated barns where they put the feed bin right where the exit fan is. So the whole ground where the truck driver steps every day, if there's a PERS infected group or whatever is in that barn, they're dragging it back in their truck cab back to the feed mill. And the feed mill is a point of contact to everywhere in the production system. So we implemented that feed transfer zone. And granted, this probably wouldn't be viable from a large-scale perspective, but boy, from a learning perspective, in our teaching herd, what we did here is basically we left one truck on the farm, and then the feed mill delivers feed, and we transfer it so the truck is never driving into the infected zone. And but I think it demonstrates, look at this, the feed truck cab was infected. This was on March 30th, about 2 weeks after. And this is interesting, the front right tire and the rear right tire. So, and the two on the left side were negative, the two on the right side. So the wheels had driven right through somewhere where that was infected. And there was infection outside of our buildings. You can see this feed truck remained negative. And then we did, to build a database for a teaching deal, every time we monitored the farm, we'd monitor the feed mill too. And we said, we want to watch, and if that escapes into the feed mill, we want to be able to document that and figure out how it got there. This first round of testing, what we're doing is environmental testing. This is Megan. Yeah, remember doing the peace circovirus stuff? Man, they did not like it in the Journal of Swine Health and Production. They thought us cowboys in Kansas didn't know anything about circo testing and environmental testing and all this stuff. And now we use it all the time in the PED days. So Megan's really a pioneer there in leading the environmental testing side. But this was kind of another, oh crap, when I got this set of tests back. Basically, what we did was we broke the farm into zones. And I borrowed this. Cassie brought this from the pet food side, which brought it from the food side in zoning in the feed mills. And we had worked on PED, and basically you break a feed mill into surfaces that have feed contact, surfaces that are directly close to that, and then other surfaces. And they do it in food plants too. It's food contact surfaces, anything like alleyways and stuff that are close to food contact, and then they have like warehouse or other places where you store the cardboard boxes. And so we did the same thing. We broke the farm into the transition zone, the farm working areas, anywhere where there were pigs, and then we have in the blue, we have the feed mill. So you can see no evidence in the feed mill, but holy cow, look at our transition zone. And this is the one that, and like we expected, unfortunately, we had drug it out through the finisher already, so that wasn't, it was successful. We'd managed to homogenize the farm and drag virus all over the farm. Basically, here, this is what scared the daylights out of me. Not only was our transition zone highly infected, but we were dragging it outside of our perimeter buffer zone. And everyone lit up positive. You can see that, except for a couple negatives. So, this was when Jason and I had some pretty long conversations about what we're doing is not working inside the farm. It was working on the feed transfer deal. That definitely is working. This was not working, so we had to come up with, and we got to thinking about it, right, Mark? We had disinfected the transition zone like once since the outbreak. And really what you got to do is that transition zone, you can't test it. It's going to continually probably get infected every day, potentially, with some kind of low level. You got to disinfect that thing and clean it multiple times in order to make that transition zone, because it isn't perfect getting in there, changing your coveralls. You know, when you're going into a farm, the benches have done a great job of segregating where clean and infected is, but it's still, that transition zone is a gray zone. It can potentially, the outside of your coveralls touch the floor and they contaminate it, then you walk through it. So we developed this whole protocol. We implemented focusing on disinfecting the transition zone. So that was some improvement. We started getting some negatives. And a real big thing was when we got this data and we got it fed back to Mark and Frank and those guys, you know, we could see some improvement. So all the pain in the rear factor they were going through was having an impact, and we could use it to motivate them to help. Now, what scared the heck out of me, although first I got to point out, Steve's car is negative. I did take the sample, but it is negative. I was a little nervous before these results came. But look at this. We got a steering wheel and floor mat positive. We also have a student apartment that is technically it's outside the farm so that they can go to class and all that kind of stuff without showering in and out of their apartment. But it was highly contaminated. And, you know, I don't know if they weren't following the rules or they didn't understand, but we had an educational component to work on there. And then we put together a 26-point detailed entrance protocol from the way you got out of your vehicle to the way you get to the barn. It's got, the first time the grad students had opened it up, they got, oh my God, I need a PhD to read this damn thing, you know. But it laid out every point of the way. And now I put it in a Word document with all kinds of words, you know, and those kind of things. I got to give Bill Williams credit for modeling our sexy how to put on booty pictures here, you know. Actually, you should see his December calendar shot. And I'm not making that up either. But this was cool. Jordan and Bo, they put together a training deal because all of a sudden we got swine science that got to come into the farm. And we got 30 people that we got to get into our farm in a biosecure manner because that was the deal. We've always had a policy where, you know, we've known that one of the ways to reduce our risk is to exclude people from our farm. We've always acknowledged that's a risk. But we said the educational component of our institution outweighs that risk. And so we got to come up with a way of training. And Jordan has come up and he's done a great job putting some training materials, a lot of pictorial stuff, and walking through the research class. Basically, you come in, and you put on shorts and a t-shirt underneath your clean coveralls so that you can leave your coveralls in the room once they're contaminated, and you can leave a lot of the contamination into the room. So we borrowed on a lot of the BSL-2, some of this is BSL-3 enhanced type principles that we set up with our farm. And the farm crew was important in this, giving us some great ideas on how to implement that. We started building benches in the facilities, leaving the boots in the farm, in the rooms, so that we didn't track it around to the other, you know, again, leaving the boots with the manure, you can see, got gloves, all kinds of booty, you know, having the materials handy there at the benches and accessible. The other thing, we would wear the shoe covers to and from, and we would change shoe covers when we left the office and coming to, because again, the shoe cover purpose is if there's contamination on that ground, we're not tracking it all over. So multiple changes of those shoe covers is important to get rid of the contamination once they are contaminated. This is just 2 weeks later, and we still got lots of infected pigs on our farm. But look at the improvement. You don't have to look a lot at the numbers. The visual, at least all the cars were negative, and it still was a little concerning. Outside the bench was positive. Around the washer and dryer, we'll tell about that story coming up. Really good news story here. All this work is working from that standpoint. Yep, already told that story. Yeah, we do have the laundry in our transition zone. Remember, it slowly started to dawn on us that we're doing laundry of the most contaminated articles of clothing on the farm in our transition zone. You know, it took a little while for my brain cells to come around that maybe this isn't the best idea. farm feed truck, after we got that positive in the cab, they started disinfecting it. We started getting negative. The pickup, we discovered the pickup bed. That was a good story, right, Mark? Yep. What are we hauling on the pickup bed? All the dead piglets that we euthanized, hauling them to the diagnostic, even though they were in sacks, and we really didn't have a protocol for our disinfecting the bed of our pickup. And we'll see down the road, once we started implementing that, we were able to clean it up. This is a good one. Here, this is now, we got an empty farrowing house, so we're trying to clean it up. And trying to get that clean, because we know the next farrowing batch, even though those animals should be immune, we want to reduce that contamination down to as little as we can and get that off. And you can see the CT values here were higher than the farrowing office desk. They're 10x higher, roughly. Basically, what I told the farrowing house manager was, and we did some E. coli, EBAC testing too, and we got the same results. The farrowing house crates were cleaner than the office desk. I told the farrowing house manager, I'd rather eat my lunch off the farrowing house floor than I would off your desk. So let's get that cleaned up. And you can see our transition zones in farrowing with the multiple disinfections. We still were getting contamination in our finisher and gestation because we got a pretty heavy viral load there. April 30th, we're about 6 weeks into this. Again, our transition zones. Now we got, before around our bench, transition zones. Around this washer and dryer, again, like I said, the light bulb's starting to come on. Why is that washer and dryer always a hot zone? Of course, Mark goes, yeah, we washed the dirty coveralls there. Yeah. Like I always say, the farm guys will always tell you the answer if we can't think of it ourselves. And so Dwayne goes, yeah, we got it. We got a spare set of washer. We keep a spare set of washer and dryers at our farm. It's so important that we have clean clothes around here that we keep a backup. We keep the old one as a backup. Well, let's hook that baby up and get it going and put our dirty stuff here out in the utility room and keep this laundry for the towels and the scrubs that we're using. We can see our transition zones. This has taken a lot of learning, and we're probably reducing the contamination in the farm, but the CTs are increasing, so we're getting better from that standpoint. Again, once we identified that the pickup bed was getting contaminated, we implemented a disinfection protocol, and by gosh, it gets clean. Yeah. You implement it, it gets clean. Tractor's still contaminated, so manure is a risk. Hauling manure. This is another one. Luckily, we were aware of this. We had debated about this for a long time, and it was part of our biosecurity protocol. We use a lot of bag feed at our farm because of the research studies. I know the grad students, they love bag feed. It's better than going to the rec center, isn't it? Anyway, these are the pallets in the feed room. Look at that. And how do those get contaminated? People weren't going and rubbing their hands on these pallets, but how many farms would you send stuff out, equipment that manure handling equipment, whatever, that you overlook, or service equipment for the electrician? What is the potential there to infect a farm? good news here, our first group after the one we had euthanized, the sows have gotten immune, our elimination program's working, we have no clinical signs. We've never had clinical evidence in any subsequent group of pigs subsequent to that. Unfortunately, just due to the gilt flow, you can't, we would have liked to close that farm next week after we were infected, fill it up with gilts. We all know, right? It doesn't work that way. You can't just go up and all of a sudden order a whole bunch of extra gilts. We got to work them through isolation and get them there and get it all, you got to sequence it. So unfortunately, that's another month down the road. And we intentionally infect them, of course, to get them immune. So we got a whole nother hot zone over in our finisher. At least we put them away from the gestation barn as far as we could. Oh, yeah, here's one. Middle of May, we decided to recheck out in the outside of our perimeter zone again. This is one that it's human nature, right? During a crisis, you can withstand doing stuff, but then stuff slips over time if it isn't, This is one of the major hurdles, and I'm going to talk about it in the gaps. The human element of biosecurity. How do you keep that heightened awareness going? And I don't have a good solution to that, but I do know it is a problem. Because again, it goes back to the old GE deal, the guys that were studying worker productivity in the 30s. They observed when they increased the lighting in the factory, the people got more productive. And so they thought it was due to the lighting, and so they then shut the lighting of the factory down to a lower level, and they thought they'd be able to observe the productivity go back to its normal level. And what happened? Productivity with less light got even better. It was because the people were getting attention and they thought they were being watched, and they thought they were being given some kind of thing that they responded to. So, anyway, yeah, here's another one. How many times have you seen this? Footprint on the bench. I don't think that means that they used it properly. I'm not very smart, but boy. And thanks to Jordan and Cassie, they took, how many, 25 or 30 of their research class? Probably the first time many of those people have been on a pig farm, and we take them through the 26-point entrance protocol to try to teach them biosecurity. And unbeknownst to them, Cassie had put glow germ in the transition zone back into the office area, and this was after the class. You can see we had glow germ here, no glow germ there. So, at least for that day of class, they learned something. And we can do it. We can take classes out there and reduce disease transmission. Laundry area, like I said, we're learning. How many farms have you seen this? I was on a farm last week. We had to throw the towels out on the floor, on top of our dirty coveralls in a pile on the side of the, and we've been walking through every barn on the farm. And what did we come up with? A simple clothes hamper lined with a garbage sack. Basically, every time you replace the garbage sack, you're cleaning the clothes hamper. And you're containing the contamination. Kind of something that we probably need to change. And the socks, that was the farm crew came up with that. We stopped wearing the socks into the shower transition zone. And we think that was also another, the socks were getting contaminated on the boots or something and contaminating the floor. Here we go, June 12th. we're like 3 months into it. First time we've gotten our contamination, and we've still got pretty good contamination out into our finishers. Here we go. Oral fluids, and here we definitely had circulation in our closure gilts yet. We're still shedding. So I think this is a good indication we're not dragging this virus around all over the farm anymore. And if we wanted to, implemented all those things with biosecurity and we did these closure gilts, we'd have just drug it back to the farrowing house again. Transition zones, this is out in July. We still had out in the finisher, we had contamination. We were probably starting to drop total load on the farm. And definitely you can see we're putting pigs into the nurseries. Our closure gilts are negative now. And like Daniel mentioned, it's easy to classify a group as positive. It's not so easy to classify a group as negative, right, Daniel? We got to put those gilts into our sow herd sometime, and we want them negative, but we don't ever know that really, truly for sure. Out in September, we're still working on the transition area. Now we're outside, helpful with some of the sunlight disinfection. We're all negative. Our pig contact area is still probably some negative or some contamination there. Here we go. We're getting ready to put gilts back down in the gestation barn. We didn't have circulation out in the pig contact areas, but we didn't get the office clean, right? How many times does that happen on farms? Again, by September, pretty good evidence we don't have circulation around. We've gone 6 months now without gilt introductions. Just to summarize here, this is the outside the fence perimeter, the transitions, the outdoor surfaces inside. You can see over time, with all the hard work of the farm crew, all the implementation of the protocols, we definitely got down here. We're out here, we're negative. But out in our non-pig contact areas and our pig contact areas, we had high levels of contamination. So I think that's, yes, you can argue we're decreasing the viral load of the farm, but I think this is pretty good evidence that all the protocols we were putting in place were working. And the good thing is, never had any positives at a feed mill, never had any positives at the, you should be pretty happy about that, Alan. We had to send, we got an isolation nursery that we send pigs back to Haver Camp, so we don't want to drag it from there over to the nursery, So we had a pretty sensitive bioassay right down the road that we're going. So what did we learn in this as we wrap up this portion? This is something, I've done BSL2 and those kind of things, but we get so focused in pig farms at keeping stuff out that when you get infected, you got to think about keeping stuff in. You got a responsibility not to spread it around your system and not spread it to your neighbor or down the road. I think we got to take some responsibility that biosecurity is not only exclusion, it's containment too. And the transition zones, again, transition zones are going to get contaminated. You just got to assume that up front, and you got to decontaminate them continuously you can't be doing diagnostic testing all the time. You got to have a protocol in place that I'll get them decontaminated every day or whatever. Those laundry areas, think about the farms you go to. These non-pig contact areas, offices, equipment, all those kind of things, they're just as important as power washing the feeders and the slats. You know, the environmental monitoring, we took this from the feed safety side. Caden and Emily talk about shipping meat to Japan. We wanted to ship samples back from Brazil to Iowa State to do, because we're working on a Seneca Valley virus outbreak that we thought was connected with a feed mill. We had I use it loosely, Cassie had conferenced with the USDA and gotten them to sign a letter that these environmental samples would be okay to ship overnight from Brazil to the diagnostic lab because we had the capability to do a massive amount of samples. Well, they got to Memphis and they got to USDA hell. They sat in Memphis for 10 days. And I got to give the USDA credit. I mean, do they really want me sending stuff from Vietnam in through Memphis, through the FedEx facility into the diagnostic lab? Of course not. You know, and as pork producers, you certainly don't want, you want that to be measured as well. But I know the one page of paperwork that we should have done 20, it was supposed to be one letter in the box that we put in, and it was supposed to explain everything, but it didn't do the trick. Okay, share with you a little bit about our ASF. Again, got to give Jordan Gebhardt a shout out. He spent Thanksgiving week going to Vietnam to collect samples. And, just a wonderful experience. I was telling Craig Good, what does the K-State group do? From the PED days, the nutrition team did not want to get involved in PED. Believe me, I did not want to get involved in that research. But that's another story how we got drug into it. But we had the facilities, it was a need, we'll jump in and do it. People get it done. And that is the Kansas State attitude. That's the attitude that I'll take out of here for the rest of my life, basically, and hopefully try to instill in the students too. And I think that's just a Kansas culture. We're can do. You get it done. This was interesting. We started the first, I shared this PD with the manager. I knew the manager of this production system in Vietnam. And I shared that presentation with him, and he was like, astute enough to say, I think we could use this. And we were like, we want to learn about ASF, man. You got a lab, you got the capabilities, we're all in. We'll help you with this. If you guys do the diagnostics, we'll help you set this up. And by gosh, this was an interesting story because I stopped at this place in August on the way back from Arkin's wedding in China, and it was interesting. The friend of ours is the manager of the pig production system, and it's part of a feed company. And the feed milling feed side, he had implemented he had taken the K-State feed biosafety and he was implementing that at the feed mill. But the feed mill wanted to charge the pig production system for all the biosecurity costs. And they wanted the pig production system to foot all that cost. So we did this environmental monitoring, and we found out this was right. We did just a few number of trucks. We were just doing this as a demonstration. And I didn't know what we'd find. But it was interesting when we looked at the data, every one of these were the truck cabs. So, and after we started thinking about this, it was making total sense because they were doing a disinfectant spray on the exterior of the truck. They were using formaldehyde in the feed, they're excluding ingredients. There wasn't any evidence of contamination within the mill, and they're disinfecting the exterior. But what's happening here is the truck cabs are getting infected, and anybody that's tried to disinfect a truck cab, you can't just go in and power wash all the stuff in there because there's all kinds of electronic, vehicles don't function today with the electronics that are in there, and that is not compatible with power washing. The cool thing is this is what it takes to make a truck wash in Vietnam. Think about putting one of those in Minnesota, huh? Heck, I was with a guy from a large production system last week, and he said his safety people wouldn't let him do that. This is the solution they came up with. They used a leaf blower to blow disinfectant into the nooks and crannies within into the truck. By gosh, wouldn't you know, the next monitoring round, we were all negative. We're making an impact. It's working. But again, human nature rears its ugly head. We come down one of 120 from truck. This was in the truck cab again. We're slipping. And then we did find, this is the only sample we found within the feed mill. And this was in the driver congregation area. So it was some driver out of his truck doing it. Then, and you can see what we did too, in order to prove a negative, we ramped up the number of samples. Again, we never truly know if they're negative. We think this environmental testing only has about a 50% sensitivity, so we're missing about half of the samples as positives. But I think the subsequent testing are telling us. This is a good one too. We go to the pig transfer station. They decided they've been able to maintain 18 out of their 20 sow farms negative. They have had 2 positives. We've been studying that too. So they transfer their market pigs all to this station because they don't have any control over the trucks that take to the market. And so they do a transfer. And they were really fanatical. Jordan brought some pictures back from it. Doing a nice job of cleaning the floor of the station and those kind of things. But again, same thing as the feed mill, it's the truck cabs that we're finding here from that standpoint. So, stay tuned on the ASF side. Jordan's doing an excellent job there. He's taking over that project, taking it on. We're going to be ready. If God forbid that happens in the U.S., we got a knowledge base that we're trying to develop here at K-State that we can do something and be impactful. Gaps, as I've already mentioned, human behavior. This is interesting. This is from the Minnesota Swine Health Monitoring, and you can see the 2 years that we had the lowest PRRS incidents and cumulative incidents in sow farms are 2013-14 after we ramped up the biosecurity of PED, and look at it. The other one is last year after we got the ASF scare in China. I look at this as this is human behavior. I don't think any of these production systems massively changed what they're doing. It's just changed the implementation of what they're doing. And just to tell you, just to give you a little bit, during the PED days, I don't know how I got involved in this. You get an email and you answer it, and then you get roped into doing stuff. You ever, that's why some people don't answer emails, because if you don't answer emails, then they don't ask you. It's like they never asked me to be on a committee in my department because I never go answer the emails, because I don't like committee stuff. So I answer this email, and it's a dairy veterinarian from Vermont. She's doing this CAP grant on biosecurity, and they wanted some stuff. And I'm like, we're in the middle of all these pork board projects. I said, I'll give you, I'll give you some ideas, and lo and behold, they write this grant, they get the darn thing funded. And so I go to the first meeting, and I tell them the feed story on PED, and they go, oh, this is great. We're going to use PED as a model. And so I ended up working with them for the last 5 years, and we had a meeting in May, and they gave me a little recognition for all the effort I'd put in there, and Julie made a comment. She said, yeah, and I can't figure out, he never wanted anything. Well, I thought in my mind, here's a project that didn't have a pig person on it. It's $7 million from the USDA, and 3/4 of it ended up being on PED because I gave them the PED story, and we captured $7 million for the swine industry and biosecurity research. I think they paid me pretty well. They just didn't know it. But it was really fun. We had pretty cool. Built an epidemiology model. I didn't do any of this. I gave them movement data. They were amazed at the way feed and pigs, and they were like, there's more pigs on truck here than you have in inventory. I'm like, yeah, welcome to a pig farm. And then it was really cool. We have this meeting with Matt Allerson at Holden Farms. He's a really good veterinarian, and they're explaining the epidemiology, because he's kind of a nerd like the rest of us, and they're explaining the model to him, and he's asking some great questions, and all of a sudden, yeah, they mentioned something. They're using the nearest neighbor hypothesis, meaning like all the pig farms closest to the feed mill get feed from that mill, and then this packing plant gets all the pigs that are closest to the packing plant. And we go, no, that's not how the pig industry works. Have you ever seen a diagram of the way we transfer pigs around the U.S.? It's called a neural network of neurons. I mean, there are things on that diagram that make no sense. But we got trucks passing each other going opposite directions with pigs, you know. And they built that into their model then. And they added human behavior and the perception of risk. And it's interesting. They come up with some information that the more information your neighbors knew, the less they invested in biosecurity. So the more information your neighbors knew, it was like, if they knew you were clean, then they decided, I don't need to invest in it. But if your neighbor was unknown, and then you heightened up your biosecurity, because the unknown is what you were protecting against. So it's kind of a counterintuitive thing, but it was interesting too, is the people that they used to categorize human behavior. They used Amazon Mechanical Turk to get the people, which is this deal where you pay people to do surveys and categorize risk. And it's not a cross-section of pig farmers, I tell you. It's these people that do it to make money, you know. And so they said, this can't be right. The risk can't be right. So they go to the Pork Expo and get a bunch of you guys to do it. And here, lo and behold, the risk profile of a pig farmer, it matches the general population. Meaning there's a huge variability. And so it was pretty cool that they were able to continue using the Amazon deal after they validated and put it into their models. And they could predict the 2014 PED outbreak and the cyclicity and the tailing off just by inputting all the things into their models. So they've done a good job of that. The other thing is they developed this game, and we took it up to a production system and had the service managers play this game. And it took these service managers about 5 minutes to figure out that if you broke the biosecurity rules, you made more money. Just like real life. You know, it's a heck of a lot. You know, if I go through the shower without showering, it saves me a lot of time. And the interesting thing was, though, there was a little time bomb in there that if you played it long enough, some people would lose all their money. So, but the people that were following the rules and gaining it steadily, they didn't lose their money. So it mimicked risk and reward pretty good, and it was pretty funny seeing these production managers and service people, because by gosh, they're pretty competitive, and a few of them were bragging, but then we played another 15 minutes and they weren't bragging anymore. So really good, really interesting. We had a Pakistani computer scientist. He'd never been on a pig farm. We took him to a pig farm. Didn't eat pork. Still doesn't eat pork, but we had a good time. The other one that I learned here, I cringe even putting this up here, but it was impactful for me. Two really good communication scientists from the University of Central Florida that have developed, they're world experts in risk communication and developing messages. They've helped modernize some of the Weather Service reports. You notice the last few years, they're kind of simpler and tell you to take shelter, and they've been involved in that. But they come up with this model, and with and Eric, I know Eric Atkinson's here. This wouldn't be anything new to the communication people, but internalization, and I have to put a shout out to Rob Ray, because they sent a video team up to him, up to his farm, and he described the process that they went through with an infection. And then they made one video that was just factual, and they made one video that followed these principles, and then they tested it on people. And the message that had the internalization, or how does this impact me? And I know Rob Ray did it from the standpoint of his farrowing. He framed it in farrowing house managers had to carry 500 5-gallon buckets of dead pigs out of their barn. And that was impactful from that standpoint. So make it personal. If you see somebody that writes a really good news article, they always lead with something that makes it personal, right? Distribution. This is something from an extension standpoint. We're always looking at different distribution channels. We have fact sheets. We have this seminar. We have on-farm visits. Making sure you're using the right channel to hit the right population. Explanation, what's happening. I think as veterinarians sometimes, this is one, right, that's kind of the only thing we do. We're good at explaining the scientific principles and maybe going to the nth degree. I think we overdo it. But giving a credible explanation of why you're doing something, I think from a good manager standpoint, people intuitively know that, but putting it down. And then action. This is the other thing. If you're trying to get somebody to do something, but you don't ask them what to do, are they really going to do it? No. If they don't know what to do, they're not going to do it. So you got to make the ask and tell them what to do. So that was a good deal. Gaps. Feed mill biosecurity. I've been proud to be part of the team, but man, we got a ways to go yet here. And I know that the investment we have at K-State in feed science, they're going to continue to be a leader in this, and it's important. And you think about all the links and connections, definitely is going to be something for the future. I haven't seen this in a while, but this was a feed truck at a packing plant. How do you get meat and bone meal to the feed mill? Yep. You got to take the feed truck there, and here you got a guy without boot covers. Yep. There's a connection there. This is one of the reasons I try to go to high health places in different parts of the world. Again, this is in Russia. It's probably the cleanest feed mill I go to. I want to get a picture of the lady that takes care of the dust. When Jordan and Jason, and they've characterized all the PED in dust, it's unbelievable. She didn't want me to take her picture, but They got this lady that runs around cleaning this feed mill. I mean, this is a working feed mill that feeds about 500,000 pigs a year. And before PED, we were going into feed mills with shoe covers and exterior covering. Now they have a bench and a shower to shower into their feed mill. This is one of the things that I've learned. Going back to Joe Kern's deal, I travel around the world, get to study a lot of different things. I found the highest pig prices in the world are in countries with some of the highest disease loads and some of the foreign animal diseases that we have. Typically, their pig price is higher. Of course, because pigs are scarcer when a lot of them die off from disease and those kind of things. And the most profitable pig farms that I go to in the world are farms that are in the middle of an ASF zone, but they have high health. They have good biosecurity. And the way they achieve that is with, keeping that. So for example, here, pig price in Russia is roughly double what it is here. And so keeping their system negative is really, really important. So, from the future standpoint, by gosh, well, we know PRRS, you got to get it out of your herds. And I'm cautiously optimistic because, the Kansas producers has been a leader in this, a lot of breeding stock history here. The Abilene crew and stuff, eliminated a lot of PRRS. But our big production systems in the U.S., it's been atrocious. A couple years ago, I was on a program with Noel Williams, and there were two veterinarians that talked before us. One stood up and talked about the new PRRS strain that had 80% mortality in finishing. And we were like, why are we standing for this? And the next veterinarian got up and said, you can't eliminate PRRS, it's just uneconomical. Well, we aren't going to be able to raise pigs if we don't address that. And so I would, and what I mentioned too, from a biosecurity standpoint, we've always underestimated the impact of disease. People want to quantify the economics, but every time I've had a mental model of what a disease costs. Myco is a good example. I always thought it was a disease we could control with vaccine, and I didn't think it cost that much in growth performance until we started having some production systems in the U.S. that go negative. And there is no way in heck we can capture performance until you eliminate myco out of it. I was just in a system last week that really, really good health, really, really good production. We were in a finishing site. It's 0.7 mortality. But they can't use antimicrobials after, I don't know, it's like day 130 of age because of the residues in the plant. They lose 1% of pigs in that last 30 days of finishing just due to myco. That's about the only disease they have in their system. So they got to figure out a way, because if they're going to go antimicrobial free, they got to get it out of their system. So that wraps up the biosecurity side. From the standpoint of something I've been passionate about, I want to continue that. Everything I can do at PIC, I think they've been a leader in health. I'm not going to be in charge of health, but something I can continue that passion with to impact pork producers around the world. From the standpoint, too, the best thing that's happened at K-State has been the graduate students. I know the four other guys that I work with, Cassie and Chad, and all the passion for training graduate students. I don't think there's any other group in the world. I know you're here, Daniel. I know you're passionate. But we'll go up against anybody. It's just been a great ride from that standpoint. They can be just like your kids, frustrate the hell out of you one day, and then do this unbelievable thing the next day, you know? And I know my kids they've rolled their eyes more than once when at the dinner table I said, there's nothing better than seeing your grad students or your kids do well. And I truly mean that. And so, you know, we get them from all corners of the globe. They come, you know, this was a really good day in December. We graduated 5 PhDs into the swine industry in 1 year. It was pretty stressful from the standpoint, that was a lot of stuff to read. But, you know, what other swine program in the U.S. would put 5 PhDs into the global industry? You can barely, you know, we're losing people right and left. And this is a strong, vibrant program. Also got to have, we got the Brazilian mafia too. You know, Brazil is an unbelievable place. I love going to Brazil. From an agriculture standpoint, you know, it could rival the U.S. It does rival. You saw the things, they've taken over soybean exports. Great university system. You think our government's corrupt? You know? Good governance is important. But they're a force to be reckoned with. Just unbelievably good people too. Really developed some good friendships there. All right, since this is my last lecture, I get a little pontification as well. So, you know, I got to credit Marcio Gonçalves with this. He always asks for what's your favorite book outside the swine when he does his podcast. And when I look back, this is probably one of the most and people that know me know I read a lot and like to read. The Road to Character by David Brooks. He's a New York Times columnist. He's the most conservative columnist at the New York Times. He is my favorite. You know, this was something that I could tell when I took a perspective of, we see this in the grad students all the time, like I mentioned. One day they'll frustrate you, one day they'll do great. You know, we all have our weaknesses, including myself. One is going way over your time on a talk. So, time is just a guideline. You know, and this is the thing that I'm really proud of the swine nutrition team. And you guys in your businesses know that. You know, the good businesses know that. You can't achieve things alone. You know, it's a lot more productive as a team. And it's really been fun being on a functional team. Hopefully I can continue a functional team, right, Kendall? We want that. No good life is possible unless it's organized around a vocation. Passion about pig production. We see that in our students all the time. It's been a guiding force and you know, from that standpoint, it's been a great career. Really, really blessed with having a great career. Never planned on being a university professor at all. And it's been good. The best leader tries to lead along the grain of human nature rather than go against it. That was one that took me a long time. You know, try to see other people's perspectives, and your way isn't always the right way. I've been humbled more than once. Also, over the last year or so, been trying to get grad students to get a global perspective of things. So I've been taking them along on trips. We've gotten to go to 4 different continents. Like I said, Jordan, he's been going to Vietnam. We took a couple to Germany, Ecuador, Brazil, Mexico. So, you know, I'm proud to be part of a program that is seen and valued globally. I just got the report from the deal from the November Swine Day. Been downloaded in 95 countries. I don't know where the Iranian pig farm is, but we had 6 downloads to Iran. And no, I'm not signing up for that trip, I tell you. I get close enough in southern Russia. And this picture is bittersweet. Unfortunately, I had to miss your wedding, Hayden, but I got to go to Arkin's. And this is Arkin Wu and his dad. And you can see it's a great picture at Arkin's wedding. You can see him and his dad, the bond they have. Unfortunately, there's something missing out of this picture, too. It's bittersweet. While Arkin was in grad school, his mother passed away. And what I'm proud about our program is we sent Arkin to China, and he didn't miss a beat in his program. He was integrated in. We did conference calls. The dean at the grad school didn't even know he was gone. We just did it. We didn't ask for any paperwork. We just did it. It was the right thing to do, and we're proud of that. And we're proud that he was able to spend that time with his family. Thank you to the pork producers. You've already got a preview. New Horizon Farms, what they've done from a research standpoint. Abilene, we've impacted a lot through the Abilene Clinic, a lot of you there. Trevor, remember that day when I brought that smelly box of ribs from Triumph that had been sitting at the diagnostic lab for 3 days? It's the only time I've set foot in radiology in 25 years at K-State. And thank God Trevor was there to x-ray those ribs. We were working on some vitamin D stuff, John. We got accused of broken ribs. It wasn't at the costochondral junction, so it wasn't vitamin D. But good story. Also, all the good Kansas producers. I put in these two just to single out for one reason. Keysucker, Dale and Michelle up there, that was where I did my first trial. My first research trial was up in the Keysucker nurseries. And it's interesting, always had a good relationship with Dale. Those of you that know Dale, he's unique. And some pretty good stories. But you know something about Dale is he rarely said no. He may have been gruff, unbelievable supporter of K-State, but you'll notice he rarely said no to anything. So one of those people that I learned a pretty good life lesson. J6 and that family, unbelievably, it's really fun to see that family grow. I did that, my second trial was done in their nurseries. 10-day-old pigs in these little cages that we did this trial, and we fed that diet on these 10-day-old pigs for many, many years. Just a great. And I already mentioned the Haverkamp group and all the other Kansas producers. Really, really good. Also have to point out one that this group of producers from Minnesota, and we actually. I think that's the youngest attendee at an extension thing that I've ever gave a talk at. We got a 3-week-old here at the extension meeting, and that would represent the third generation that I've worked with in this family. And the Veldhusens are part of a group of Minnesota producers that we put together originally as a buying co-op, but it's turned into both information sharing to them, but it's also turned into something that they support the K-State. They support a graduate student at K-State. I mean, how many of you support a graduate student in another state that you don't pay taxes in? Pretty phenomenal vision of those producers in that group. And actually, a little bit of this transition was started by those producers asking, what's the K-State transition plan? I don't think they meant for me to take it that literally, but it did get us thinking as a group, and me personally, how are we going to sustain this in the future? And I know you guys are going to be part of that. You'll be part of lobbying our administration, continuing to sustain the program, and I know you'll have that support. Interesting story about the Perko group, the Veldhuisens in specific. I have 2 brothers, and all 3 of us have touched that family in indirect ways that they didn't even know we were brothers, actually. I've worked with that family for many years. My brother's takes care of their irrigation systems, and my other brother shares an agronomist with them, and they knew each other from extension meetings. It was kind of funny. We had a meeting once, and Chris is, all of a sudden the bell goes off, and he goes, "Is your brother Cody?" I said, "Yeah." So just great families. All the other production systems that I've worked with, another research collaborator, unbelievably good, been doing research for over 25 years. They've done pork board projects with us. Mike had to take the call from Ken Holden when we sold 490-pound pigs that time in the pork board study, and had to remind him that we did put in a little money into the grant to do that. Interestingly, though, I was on a farm last week that they were averaging 143 kilograms last week with their pigs, and we went to 150 kilograms. From that standpoint. Sunterra, we heard from those guys a couple years ago. I'll report 85% of their pigs went to market last year with no antimicrobials. Feed, water, or injectable in their production system on about 17,000 sows. Unbelievable learning experience for our industry. That's coming down the pike, and we can do it. And we will do it. And then all the feed companies, ingredient suppliers, all the good people. It's been great for 25 years. Feed safety team, I already mentioned them. Cassie and Chad and Jason, it's been great from that perspective. Also want to thank my colleagues. The team aspect, unbelievably good. Just a great atmosphere to work in. Something I'll take with me forever. Also want to thank my family, my mom and dad, brothers, nieces, nephews, my grandparents. My grandfather's the one that got me into pigs because my dad's a cattle guy. Pigs was something that I could do that my dad wasn't really interested in, so I could take ownership in it. And the kind of interesting thing, many years later, it dawned on me, he had done the same thing. My grandpa was interested in pigs, he was interested in cattle, and it was because he could take ownership in that and do it on his own. So, just want to acknowledge them. Also, I want to acknowledge my kids. Lisa, it didn't work out so well with your sister, but man, did I get 3 great kids out of the deal. Yeah, we always have that. And, just wonderful. They love the outdoors, love a lot of the passions that I do. They're all 3 into science and technology. It's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful individuals. I've been blessed from that standpoint. And looking forward, transition. It's both scary and exciting. Looking forward to going to PAC and thank you for the last 25 years. Thank you.
Steve, really appreciate the information, the friendship, all that you've done. You've summarized your passion for the areas that you have a distinct interest in, as well as the graduate students, and really on behalf of the entire program, wanted to give you a little memento. I guess, like you said, it's not a funeral, but we don't have your picture on this like it's a pamphlet. But we do have a number of the graduate student pictures, and just recognize Steve for his 25 years here at K-State, and we thought no better way than to recognize a lot of the students that you've impacted along the year to be part of that. So once again, let's give Steve one last round of applause.
And like I said, Joel, this isn't a funeral, you know, I'm not going away either.
Well, we'll see if we let him back in. So,